On the one hand, the plot of Red is fairly simple, namely that a young woman, Valentine, accidentally drives over a dog at a crossroads. And when she brings the dog to the owner, meets this old guy, a judge who's retired, and learns that he has been listening in on the neighbors' phone conversations through sophisticated surveillance equipment.
Allez-vous-en.
But on a deeper level, Red is about the haunting connections that we see, even though Valentine doesn't know it yet, between this old judge and her neighbor Auguste, a young judge who's having romantic problems of his own, just as Valentine is having problems with her boyfriend. And it's almost like from the very beginning of the film, Kieślowski's narrative strategy to have the camera showing us Auguste and Valentine in the same frame even though they don't see each other, that makes us, like the judge, want for Valentine and Auguste to finally get together.
Most of his films are about coincidences and how things are tied up in a strange way. And it's true, you can see even a color here and there, or a cafe named Joseph, and suddenly the judge is named Joseph as well. These kind of things, he loved that, yeah.
A lot of his films are actually about creating connections between people and between events and places and objects. What he's trying to do is actually make films about very abstract forces.
Perdu?
Not just love, but chance, destiny, coincidence, freedom of will.
L'autre jour, après votre départ, vous avez pleuré.
J'ai pleuré.
Moi, j'ai éteint ma radio. Je me suis assis à mon bureau. Il n'y avait plus d'encre dans mon vieux stylo à plume avec lequel j'ai écrit toute ma vie. Alors j'ai pris un crayon à papier et j'ai écrit des lettres à mes voisins et à la police.
He was trying to make films about the soul, for want of a better word. And in doing that, he's actually getting to some very basic questions we have about our lives. Why are we here? How do we find happiness? What's important in life? Is it freedom? Is it equality? Is it love? And he's dealing with these very abstract things, but in a very material and accessible way. And I think that's what made him great.
He said that he wanted to film intimacy and something very subtle in human feelings. The perceptions, the intuitions, all these kind of subtle feelings that are really the forces that are driving us, actually.
Et pour Rita?
C'est une chienne très intelligente, vraiment. Prenez-la.
Vous ne la voulez pas?
Je ne veux rien.
Vous n'avez qu'à arrêter de respirer?
C'est une bonne idée.
There are a lot of levels on which Red is working that have to do with the doubling of the old judge and the young judge. The question of whether the younger judge has any existence at all, or is he just a mirror image of the old judge if he were the right age for Valentine.
Un gros qui est tombé tout en bas, quelque part ici.
The question of whether the old judge knows somehow that she is destined to meet a younger version of himself.
Le livre s'était ouvert à une page au hasard. J'en ai lu quelques phrases. C'est la question qu'on m'a posée à l'examen.
On t'a posé la question? Celle du livre que tu as fait tomber dans la rue. Ce que tu m'as raconté.
Kieślowski told me that he was fascinated by Kierkegaard's short novel Repetition, in which the basic question being asked is, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could go back and live something over again, but better, with the knowledge that we now have later in life? And that's a kind of scenario informing the script of Red. The possibility that maybe Valentine will be happy with a younger version of the judge, thereby transcending the mistakes that he made in his youth.
It was this mix of rational and irrational, which, you know, this like crossing destiny, this, you know, this like shivering mystery you have when you touch the subjects which are over the regular life.
Il y a une belle lumière.
Service météo personnalisé, bonjour.
J'ai appelé tout à l'heure, je pars demain en voiture à Turin.
And in the same time, the way he's doing that is extremely precise and in some way even tender but cold. And it's maybe for the same reasons, you know, the people love so much Sixth Sense, which is much more commercial movie in the concept, but which touches in some way the similar area. I think what made it so special, it was like the brain exploring that. It wasn't just, you know, cynical or irresponsible game with the subjects. I think that he really, in a very hard way, tried to touch the mystery, which is in some way a religious mystery, even if he never called it in this way.
I know all filmmakers do this. They use lighting and they use editing and they use music and they use sound, but he used them in such an expressive way. He really thought about this with a sort of sense of detail that most people don't even touch upon.
The philosophy of Krzysztof Kieślowski about sound is really interesting. And even I can say the contrary, almost the contrary of the way of the American people speak about sound design, like it means one action on the screen, one sound. And with Krzysztof is nothing on the screen, nothing happen, and something happen out of screen. You can hear a plane, something arriving, you know, it's very interesting because the strange dramatic situation is very heavy, silence but heavy with the judge, with relationship and
Après, je me suis dit que c'était du dégoût.
And also, Krzysztof uses the sound, the silence. And that's very rare to find people using silence in cinema, you know. Generally, when you sound design the soundtrack of a movie, you make silence. People say, hey, well, where is the sound? You know, it's a fault. Everybody frightening people, you know. But there is no sound here. And in Krzysztof says, I don't want sound here. Very nice.
Part of my work was to make a poster for the Red. The first idea in the script was she's blowing the balloon of chewing gum, and we understood that this is empty and has really no link with the movie. And then Piotr Sobociński proposed that it should be framed from the last image of the Red movie, and then he brought the picture, and after I did the collection of the picture in the studio in Paris, I remember Krzysztof who asked me, Piotr, do you have a right picture? I say, I will show you, but I'm not so sure. He said, okay, let's do it another time. And then Iran came to Warsaw, and during 1.5 hours, we had immediately a good picture.
Voilà. Là, triste.
It's an example of Krzysztof. He asks you to go as deep as possible, past your limits, and this is beautiful.
He was the writer, the director, and he was the editor as well. And he used to work with another editor, but he knew, and as he was filming, he had a precise idea of how he would edit next. So sometimes I would say, oh, I didn't like that take. He said, but when didn't you like it? I said, you know, when I said this, he said, oh, it won't be in that shot anyway. So he kind of knew already how he would cut it.
He uses all the tools at his command. And with Red, you've got this amazingly radiant look. The lighting is extraordinarily beautiful. There's something immanent in the image. That, of course, suits the story very much because you can look at the judge character and wonder, well, is he playing God or might he even have some sort of power like that?
C'est cette maison.
And it was very demanding for the actors to be in the light. I remember having to walk here and turn my face that way and saying, but why? These kind of things, you know. And I knew that that would tell the story as well, you know. I knew that If the face starts to be in the shadow at this moment, it has an effect on the story.
For Red, Kieślowski returned to the wonderful actress from the double life of Véronique, Irène Jacob, essentially the woman of whom he made a star.
Michel.
She plays, although a different character from Véronique in Red, somebody who's deeply connected because of the great warmth, openness of spirit, which are, of course, parts of Irène Jacob herself.
Irène Jacob is mind-blowingly wonderful in this film, in my opinion. And obviously in Kieślowski's too. And I think he fell a little bit in love with Jacob because he wrote Red with her in mind.
He told me, yeah, I'm going to do 3 treatments and you're going to be in the last one, fraternity, brotherhood.
Rita!
And I thought that this part was not very complete. I thought that it was too idealized and I was not very happy about it. And I said, it looks to me like you put a lot of yourself in the judge and, you know, in his philosophy, etc. But you didn't put a lot of yourself in Valentine, and as a result, I was afraid she was not very deep.
C'est possible.
And he said, oh, you think so? I said, yes, because you are idealizing this character in a way that everything looks so easy, but if she's interested in this judge, it probably has an echo on her personal life, that she's unsatisfied, or things that are unresolved, and she needs to resolve with the presence of this character. And so he rewrote that she had a mother that she wouldn't talk with, she had a brother that she couldn't have a connection with, she had a boyfriend that was always away, so she had relationships that were unreal, and suddenly when she meets the judge, surprisingly, there is something that happens, you know. And he said that as a result, this film became a discussion between the genuine part of you as you start life with all your expectations and the later part of you when you have been a bit, you have gone through the events and through your hopes and expectations and you've been disappointed sometimes, or, you know, and this dialogue between the two parts of you that he could feel in himself probably.
Vous avez fait quelque chose pour?
The question of why Valentine is not repulsed by the judge can be answered perhaps by that which Piesiewicz said about the film Red. He said Red is a film against indifference. I think most of us, seeing a guy like that with his surveillance equipment, would go, oh, I wash my hands of you. But what she said specifically when she leaves is,
On ne peut avoir que de la pitié pour vous.
Pity, not revulsion and not indifference. Somehow she understands that if he is doing these rather dastardly deeds, there's got to be a reason somewhere for which she feels the pity. And that's what, of course, leads him to change his ways.
They don't want to deal with each other, but at the same time, they're invaded by each other, meaning it's like, and it works in a revolting way. They need each other because they're shocked by each other. And the shock is the vitality. It's because they're shocked that they're able to evolve. For example, it's like when she says, I would like to do something.
Si je pouvais faire quelque chose.
Vous pouvez être
Qu'est-ce que vous voulez dire?
juste ça. Être.
He's provoking her, and through this provocation, a real contact can be established then. I think that is her evolution, really.
Valentine is quite simply good. Forgive me if that sounds ridiculous, but she's someone who tries to do good in her life. When she comes out of her ballet class, there's this tiny moment where she's drinking her water and she just goes,
Bonne journée.
to a person we never see. Good day, she says to someone. That's who she is. She is open. She is giving. When she sees an old woman trying to get a bottle into a recycling bin, she goes and helps her. Unlike the characters of the trilogy before, Blue and White, who don't help the old people who can't get a bottle into a bin. Why is Red a film against indifference? Because it suggests that we all need to fight against the tendency to dismiss people who aren't as good as we might want them to be, and rather to allow them to tell us who they are so that we can help them get to a better stage.
What's quite interesting is, I suppose, in a way, that with freedom and equality, the conclusion of the film is probably that human beings don't want them after all, because there are other things more important. With fraternity, I think, basically Kieślowski is saying, well, fraternity is like compassion, and that is another form of love, and yes, that's what we all want, really.
Est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un que vous aimez?
Non.
Est-ce que vous avez aimé?
I think that he was afraid of the destruction of love. I think that he wanted to find the pureness and the beauty of love again, which was possible only if he can find again himself. It's what he's searching for, which is also in some way the subject of Trintignant, who tries to find himself and to find the peace. The peace is a very important word for Krzysztof. One of his important movies was called The Peace. Like, I don't want anything more, I just want the peace.
The casting of Jean-Louis Trintignant is also very important here because his face carries with it associations from other films that he has made in Europe in particular. He once was a great romantic lead, like A Man and a Woman of Claude Lelouch. And here it's that aged face, no longer so beautiful. His body suggesting a kind of impotence when he walks with a cane or pours the kettle of water in front of Valentine. You get the sense of somebody who's already lived whatever great stuff he's got and has very little left.
Je vais vous montrer quelque chose.
By the end, however, Valentine has given this character, played by such a magnificent actor, the sense that it isn't over.
The amazing thing about Trintignant's performance, he's playing a retired judge, an individual, but he might also be playing somebody who has godlike powers to influence people's lives.
Tu ne veux pas que je touche ta cicatrice sur le ventre comme il...
And to some extent, I think he's playing Kieślowski. He doesn't act like Kieślowski in the film, but he's playing somebody who is listening into people's lives, turning it into something by playing around with their lives, affecting them, which is exactly what a director was.
I think that the character of the Trintignant, for many reasons, has something of Krzysztof. In the first time, he always thought that being a filmmaker, especially a documentary filmmaker, which was one of the longest part of his career, it was like spying on the people. It's like stalking the people in some way.
Venez voir.
Being a filmmaker in general is that you are unable to live your life. Instead of that, you have to steal from the lives of another people. So from this point of view, Trintignant is some kind of the ironic porte-parole of Krzysztof.
Il vous plaît?
Beaucoup.
And he's also somebody who's grown tired of his profession, which Kieślowski by then was. He retired after Red.
The honesty and intellectual honesty and moral honesty is something which is so rare among the filmmakers in our days that it's why also, not only because of his talent or the subjects he was interested in this period, he stayed alone. It was no one like him.
As with the Decalogue, whose whole is greater than the sum of its parts, so the Three Colors trilogy is, I think, best viewed as one entity. And of course, these connections are most manifest in the last sequence of Red. Because Kieślowski saves from the ferry accident not just the couple from Red, but Julie and Olivier from Blue, and Karol and Dominique from White, that gives you the sense of closure for the entire trilogy. We were focused perhaps on Julie at one point, but it was at the same time that Karol was struggling to regain a new dignity and get his wife back and get back at his wife. At the same time that Valentine was getting close to the judge and giving him a new possibility for living with warmth and humanity. Imagine how far this character has come since we first met him. He's looking out the window at whom? At us. Somehow implicating us in his newfound humanity, and also, of course, connecting him to the other endings of the trilogy where we had Carol looking up at Dominique behind a window, a tear rolling down his face, and at the end of Blue, Julie behind a window, a tear coming down her face. Here, though, despite the horrible tragedy of a ferry accident that has killed many people, the fact that our characters have been saved, almost like a Noah's Ark, a pair from blue, a pair from white, a pair from red, suggests some kind of hope for the judge, for Valentine, for Auguste, and I dare say for us.
It's a bit like a book. You can see it many times and read it differently. It's a film that you can understand through your own interpretation rather than just a rational way to understand it. So everybody, I think, find a personal way to approach these films.
When I saw that film in its premiere in Cannes, I came out, I was shaking. I couldn't speak. I felt that Kieślowski had extended this magnificent generosity of spirit, not only towards his own creations, but actually towards the audience. It was a way of thanking us for remaining interested in his films.
I saw Kieślowski while he was making Three Colors. He claimed that he had said all that he had to say on film, and that Red was his summation work. He was afraid of repeating himself, not having anything new and original to add to these great films. He was exhausted. Was it that he knew he was going to die young? I mean, his father had died young, and that he kept pushing to make these films at such a fast rate? Or was it that he was pushing himself so much that it created a really bad situation for his heart? I don't know the answer here. All I know is that it's very sad.